So I've been thinking about just how incredible the camera equipment has become. I mean, we're entering a time now where you can get an amazing camera for less than $1,000. And even if you're shooting on a camera phone, you really have a very capable camera right in your pocket. And this has created an environment where in a lot of ways, everyone is a photographer. And because of that, I think it's harder than ever to stand out. It's not about having the best gear. And I don't think it ever has been, but I think it's interesting that we're entering a time where finally people are being forced to look at what it really means to create beautiful images. And I think at the center of that discussion is composition and just simple compositional techniques. So in this video, I want to talk to you guys about leading lines. Leading lines are a really simple and effective compositional technique that you can start using to enhance your images. So if it's your first time here and you're looking to improve your photography and video skills, you can start right now by subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So the real goal in composition and in any compositional technique is to lead the viewer's eye around the frame, either in a way that leads them directly to the subject of the image, or just creates a sense of movement around the frame so that their eye is perpetually moving around and looking at everything that's in the image. And this idea of using leading lines as a compositional technique is really popular, right? Because if you look at most images and you look at the world around you, there are just so many naturally occurring lines. Specifically, you have streets, you have buildings, power lines, rivers, train tracks. Most situations that you're going to find yourself in will have some very dominant leading lines in your frame that you can take advantage of. And if you don't take advantage of those lines, they can have a negative impact on the images that you're creating. So I just want to show you a few techniques that you can use to keep that from happening so that you can be aware of the leading lines that are in your images and you can leverage those to make more powerful images for your films and for your photography. So here are some simple tricks to make sure that you're utilizing those leading lines. The very first thing is to make sure that you understand how you can identify the lines that are in your frame. So what I like to do is if you just look at whatever it is that's in front of you, let's say that you're taking a picture of a street, if you squint your eyes, really have them almost closed so that you can just see through your eyelashes to kind of allow everything to get really blurry around you. It creates the sense that everything you're seeing is a very blurry and very blocky shape. When you blur your vision that way, the leading lines become very distinct and all of the extraneous detail kind of falls away. So once you identify those leading lines that are in your frame, maybe there's one, maybe there's multiple, it'll allow you to understand whether or not you need to reposition yourself to take advantage of that leading line, or maybe you just need to make small adjustments. The two easiest ways to use leading lines once you've identified them are going to be your 45-degree angle, which is the line is a 45-degree angle from where you're standing. And that 45-degree leading line will create a diagonal line that kind of cuts across your frame and it leads the eye diagonally across the frame. The other really common one is the 1 point, which that's going to create a strong sense that the lines are leading the eye toward the very center of the frame, which creates a lot of dynamic sort of movement right towards the center of the frame. And that can create a lot of interesting tension. Now, once you've identified those lines and you know how you want to use them, you have to make a decision about whether or not that line is leading the viewer's eye to the subject of your photo, which is one way to use it. A second way that you can use that leading line would be to create a sense of movement for the subject of your photo. So you're actually starting with the subject and you see those lines are kind of suggesting a path for that subject. And you can kind of mix these two, where maybe the leading line is creating a sense of movement for that subject, but then as the eye moves across to the other side of the frame, at the opposite end of that line, there's a secondary subject. which can also be an interesting way to use the lines to kind of connect those two subjects using the lines. And the same thing can be said for this idea of doing the 1-point leading lines, where maybe those lines are all pointing towards the center and boom, your subject's right there in the middle of the frame. Or maybe the subject's not quite in the middle, but is heading towards the center of the frame and the lines are heading towards the center of the frame. And so all of that interest is being drawn towards the center of the frame and the subject is being led there. And that kind of creates a sense of narrative almost within the photo. So images that utilize this technique of leading lines have what's known as a dynamic composition, right? Because the eye is naturally being forced to move across the frame in some way. And it does create an almost like unsettling or exciting sense of energy as your eye is kind of like glancing around the composition. Whereas if you look at a photo that, let's say, has very rigid or straight horizontal or vertical lines, while that can definitely look really interesting, it has a more balanced and tranquil sensibility to the image, which is its own look. And that is also a valid compositional technique, but it does create a completely different sense and a completely different energy. And that's really important to be aware of. Take a look at one of your old projects and see if you can identify some leading lines in those images, because you might have a favorite photo or a favorite video that you put together that was already utilizing leading lines, because maybe this was a compositional technique that you were sort of using from an instinctual place, and now you can actually recognize it and to take advantage of it going forward. But if you look back at an old project and you see some leading lines that maybe there was a missed opportunity there, try to recreate those and this time use the leading lines, or do a completely different shoot and try to make the focus the leading lines so that you can experiment with different ways to use this. Because once you kind of understand the power of using leading lines to create your compositions, it becomes like this awesome tool that you have on your tool belt, so that when you're looking through your viewfinder and you're constructing an image, it's just like a vocabulary that you have. It's a visual vocabulary that you can always go back to. And this starts to inform the way that you compose your photos. And the more and more that you build that vocabulary, the faster you're gonna get at figuring out what that composition should be for whatever it is that you're shooting. So look for those really strong edges in the locations that you're shooting, whether they're streets or buildings or water lines or power lines or trees or cars, or maybe it's paint on the ground or on the wall. Anything that's creating a really strong line, just look for those things and start utilizing them in building your compositions. And over time, as you're doing that again and again and again, time after time after time, this concept of leading lines is going to become something that you just do instinctually, and you're not even really going to be thinking about it, right? It's going to be like riding a bike, where you just kind of do it and you don't have to think about why you're doing it, but your images are going to start looking better and you're just going to keep improving. So if you want to continue improving your photography and your video skills, I'm going to put another video on screen right now that I think you should really check out, because it's going to help you improve your skill sets even more. Please don't forget, if you learned something, let me know by leaving a comment below, hit the thumbs up button, and subscribe for more videos like this every single week. Thanks.